You got to be able to meet people in their shadows to help them come out of that to be the best of who they are, the best that God's made them to be. But we don't know it if we don't understand them and if we're not listening. Meeting people in their shadows is going to be an important piece of all of this. And the best way you do that is to know, as we've talked about in the previous episodes, you need to know who you are. You need to know how you're wired. You need to know what your shadows are too. And that way you'll best be able to communicate with your players and those that you lead.
Welcome to the How Soccer Explains Leadership podcast, where we explore leadership principles through the lens of the beautiful game.
Welcome back to How Soccer Explains Leadership. Thanks a lot for being a part of the conversation. We are continuing these great conversations in season 14, which the theme of it all is the people advantage and how we can perform better as teams by understanding each other better. And so the first 4 episodes, we've gone into, just the overall, it's typically not a skill or talent problem. It's a people problem. We talked about DISC and what it is. And then we got into the kind of more of the nuts and bolts of it. Obviously this is all a flyover, but we talked in episodes 3 and 4, really about how you can incorporate this in. And if you don't understand your people and you don't really connect with them, you're going to miss something. You might unintentionally create disengagement because you're not understanding yourself and understanding the others on your team. So this episode, we're going to kind of continue the conversation by going to the shadow side of our strengths. And the strengths of our personality styles are just that. They're awesome. A D will go after it and get results and make things happen. An I will inspire and be one that can truly help a team perform at higher levels. An S will bring peace and harmony to a team that is so needed for team cohesion. And a C will bring excellence and value to a team that is so critical to that team's success, to not just do things now, but to do things right. So that's what some of the stuff we talked about over the last 4 episodes. But today we're talking about the shadow side of this. Everything has its shadow. So Paul, what do you think about this idea?
Yeah. So, I mean, it just kind of goes to that, the research that's out there that talks about sometimes your greatest strength is also your greatest weakness, right? Like you said, everything has its shadow, but we can look at, people within our own family or our own players. And a lot of times the thing we like most about a kid or a player or someone on our staff, it's also the thing that can really frustrate us at times, because it has to be honed in or it has to be dialed in or dialed down. But as a leader, how do we, if we know that, then we can best communicate with them to help them be successful. And that's what we're talking about. These are the things off the field that can really help us be successful on the field. And it's a missed opportunity, I think, from a lot of our coaches out there, because it always becomes about the X's and the O's and driving and driving and driving. But if we can take a step back and really get to know ourselves and know our players, we're going to have more success on the field. And I think with that, right, you want to know their strengths, but you got to know how that leads to their weaknesses. Again, I think I talked about it on the last episode. When I would go into player meetings, you have to know the things that motivate players and the things that will shut them down. And I think that's what we're talking about here today.
Absolutely. And we talked about it a little bit when we went through the DISC summary, but the reality is, if you're a high D, you're going to be more aggressive. You're going to go after it. That could lead to recklessness, right? I mean, how many times I can remember with my son, he was aggressive. They called him the missile. He was a 6 and he would go in for tackles and he would go in and the coach would say to him, I'm glad he had a great coach. And he says, you need to learn how to control that. You need to learn not only when to go in, but how to go in, because you are always half inch from a red card. And that's just the reality of it. You see these players who are really aggressive and they can get reckless really quickly. And that's something that now, especially in today's modern game, red cards come a lot easier than they used to when we were younger, Paul. I don't know if you remember back in the day, you could like blow someone up. I know that as a goalkeeper. I could blow someone up and miss the ball, and they'd be like, all right, well, not even a foul sometimes as a goalkeeper, but you definitely wouldn't be getting a red card and maybe a yellow. But it was like those cards stayed in the pocket most of the time. Nowadays, not the case. So, you need to be able to adjust for that, and you need to be able to say, and coach that and understand that and come into that and be able to speak to them as we've talked about in the last couple episodes, but also say, hey, this is a huge strength, but if you're not careful, if you're unhealthy, if you're stressed, if you're mad, if you're angry, if you're, upset about whatever, it might manifest in these different ways, right? So you have that steady person that could become just passive and withdrawn. So if if you have that high S personality who is bringing peace and harmony, if they're unhealthy, if they're not connecting well, if you're not connecting well with them, they could just become passive and like, whatever, I don't care. And on a team that needs to win, that doesn't work well, right? And you can also have the conscientious, that cautious high C that can just become overthinking. And we all know players, you probably were there at some point in your career, Paul, where you were just overthinking everything. And when you're overthinking, did you perform well?
No, of course not. No.
If you're thinking
Mhm.
on the field, how many times have you said to a player, just stop thinking, just play,
Yeah.
right? I mean, thinking's for practice is for thinking. The game is for
Yeah.
playing. And if you're overthinking, that happens a lot with with players. And then the creatives, oftentimes the eyes are the creative players, but if unhealthy, that could turn into just being unfocused. And if you're unfocused, that's not good either, right? So all these kind of shadow sides of it, if we're not careful and we're not understanding that and we're not seeing it, because again, awareness, you can't be aware of something unless you're aware of something, right? And so how can we help them understand that so that we can see it and we can actually address it when we see it, and then we can hopefully help them to be better with it. Because you said something early on in this episode. All of this is to help ourselves flourish more and our players flourish more on and off the field. And so, what do you think of that?
Yeah, no, it's just so important that we, that we, we keep coming back to this, but it's just so important that we know ourselves and we know our players, and this is just another piece of that. And like we've said, these episodes build on each other. So if you haven't caught the previous four, please go back and listen because these really do all build on each other. But I think a lot of times when we're going to have conversations with our kids, it's not in the moments where they're being extremely successful, right? It's in the moments where they're struggling. And that's where we're meeting them in their shadow. So we've got to be able to meet players in their shadows. You got to be able to meet people in their shadows to help them come out of that to be the best of who they are, the best that God's made them to be. But we don't know it if we don't understand them and if we're not listening. So that's where that kind of plays in for me is I think just meeting people in their shadows is going to be an important piece
Mhm.
of all of this. And the best way you do that is to know, as we've talked about in the previous episodes, you need to know who you are. You need to know how you're wired. You need to know what your shadows are too. And that way you'll best be able to communicate with your players and those that you lead.
And you hit something there that's really important is to meet them in their shadows, right? But
Yep.
sometimes, usually, I would say, almost all the time, I wouldn't necessarily confront them when they're in that shadow. When they're
For sure.
in the weakness, when they're in the stressed, when they're in that unhealthy, that's not the time to come in and give your critical advice and give
Hmm.
your great world changing views on why
They don't
they
want to hear it in
should
that moment.
change the behavior,
No.
right?
Mhm.
Absolutely don't want to hear it in that moment. And they won't hear it in that moment. They won't, right? We talk about earlier. It's not what you say, it's what they absorb. You're wasting your breath if a high D is angry and you're going in and you're saying, "Hey, stop being angry." Like, you might as well say, "Yeah, I hate you," right? I mean, it's your anything you say is gonna not be received well. So wait until they're out of that. Wait till they're healthy and go into that and say, "Hey, you know what? Like, when you get to how you were, that's not helping anybody. And what does that look like?" And if you're talking about a soccer field, like if they go in for a reckless tackle because they're mad and they're ticked off, and that's not the time to pull them off and say, "Hey, you can't do that." They're like, that's not going to help. Like, it's like that's not going to do it. At the practice, the next practice, say, hey, when you go in and do that, you're not helping yourself. You're not helping the team. When you get a red card, how is that helping anybody? That's hurting you. You're out for 1 to 4 games, and your team is hurt in that game and the next however many games because you're not in the game, right? So wait until they're healthy and have the conversation then, and be able to, speak to why it, hurts them to actually go to those places. And then the next question is, how can you stay healthy? Right? How can you stay healthy so the strength doesn't become a weakness? Right? How can you be aware of that, it becoming a weakness, and reduce the amount and mitigate against that? That's where the real sweet spot comes in. That's where the little superpower of all this stuff comes in, is you can actually come in and say, okay, when we're aware of this, it'll be a check. And when we see ourselves getting there, like when you go like the event, when Bruce Banner starts going into the Hulkness, like how can you, once it starts happening, you can't change it. How can you prevent it from happening? Right? How can you prevent it from happening? Because once you're in it, you're done for, right? For that moment, right? Not forever, but for that moment. So, what do you think?
Such a critical point. I'm glad you brought that up, because I definitely left a gap there, and so I'm glad you filled that in. That's so valuable. So definitely if you missed that, go back and listen to that, folks.
All right, you got any last thoughts on this one, Paul?
No, man, it's been good. I think this is, again, selfishly, this is all great for me. And I think, for you, I would speak for you and say that as well. But just encourage folks to go back and listen to the previous episodes and fill in the gaps here where needed. And just, I know we've got a few more that are part of this series as well. So I'm excited to lean into those also. So this has been fantastic.
So if you're liking this, folks, definitely share it with others, because if it's helping you, it'll help them. And, we're halfway through this season 14, and I'm excited for the next half too. But we're not going to do a halftime show, because all of this is just goodness that we're just going to keep going, and we're going to keep this season rolling. So if you want to go deeper on any of the things we're talking about this season, this is really what I'm doing with Dark Leadership Group. And so darkleadership.com, you can set up a strategy call with me if you'd like to do that. It'll be a half hour, no obligation, no cost. And we can talk about how all this might help you and can help you and your team. If you want to learn more about Warrior Way, you can do that at the show notes. warriorway.com is the website for what Paul and Marcy are doing there in Waco and throughout Central America, and probably going to expand throughout the world here pretty soon. But with all this, folks, we're just hoping that you're taking all this and you're using everything you're learning to be a better coach, a better spouse, a better parent, a better player, a better leader, better in everything that you do. And you continually remind yourself that soccer does explain life and leadership. Thanks a lot. Have a great couple weeks.